Hi, I'm Ashley Becca. I did my final senior project paper on Child Protective Services, some of the problems that they face as far as the recommendations that may help them as a failing system. So, to be quick, sorry my visuals are just paper because um, my computer went out like the day before this was due. So, I just got to work with it. So, across the country, we all depend on employees from the Department of Health and Family Services as well as those from Child Protective Services to assist families and children in need, especially children who are going through neglect, maltreatment, abuse, or just in an unsafe household. It could be domestic abuse, mental health issues, substance abuse, things like that. So, as we know, such things as neglect, maltreatment can get a child taken away from the home. A lot of times, these children end up in a foster home. And once in the foster home, it's kind of difficult for the parents to gain custody back again. I would have to say, according to current statistics, there's over 400,000 children in the U.S. who enter foster care in 1 year. 15% of those will remain in foster care for over 3 years. And so that 400,000 is reoccurring every year. There's quite a few children who are going through foster care. What also a concerning statistic is that over 1,000 children die of neglect or torture each year while under supervision from the Department of Health and Family Services and Child Protective Services. So why are these things happening? Well, as we know, it's got to be tough to be a CPS social worker. They're very, very overworked. They have the highest burnout rate of human service providers. It's a very demanding job. It's very difficult. A lot of the workers also deal with secondary post-traumatic stress syndrome from seeing what they see every day with this type of neglect and violence in the home and with children. They can deal with depression. They can deal with all the things secondary to what they're seeing with these children and families. So let's see. As I talked about, Child Protective Services. Who are they? What do they do? It's a service department that each state has. CPS follows up with both state and federal laws in order to protect children and families. Primarily, social workers who work for CPS have the responsibility of assessing all concerns such as risks, dangers, and safety and well-being of a child. They also investigate most cases to validify the complaint which was made against a family member or in regarding to the safety of a child to see if the child or children are safe to remain in the home. And as I mentioned earlier, many times they're not, and then they will be put into protective custody with a foster family. Another startling fact is that once these children reach the age of 18, regardless if they're in school or not, they age out the system. What does that mean? Well, when they age out, regardless of their traumas being serviced, their mental health being addressed, struggling, they can face being homeless with no support from CPS or any other system. So that's a problem with CPS. Also, removing children from the home can be very traumatic as well. They will suffer social issues, behavioral issues, mental health issues, things like that. And all those things need to be addressed with the appropriate resource or like provider, clinic, things like that. So Again, to reiterate, children who experience abuse and neglect face an array of social, emotional, and behavioral problems. These problems left unaddressed will continue to follow them into adulthood. Many times these children will turn into the adults, and as the adult, they'll be the perpetrator or the abuser instead of the abused as they were as a child, because these issues are not being addressed appropriately. The well-being of children is a continuous concern of the child welfare system and other support agencies. But as previous director of the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, Mr. Samuel saw firsthand the unintended consequences of dedicating too few resources to achieving healing and recovery processes from maltreatment. When these children are in foster care, and they're not receiving the assistance needed to help them heal from previous trauma and abuse, the chances are that those children will sift through multiple foster placements within a very short period of time. The cycle will tend to continue the longer the trauma is left unaddressed and untreated. Children need permanence, meaning one household, one group, one family. And this is why they may have exhibited high rates of educational and lifelong success once permanence is established. To achieve this with children living out the home, Department of Human and Family Services took steps to introduce trauma-based interventions. They do mental health assessments for all children when they enter the foster care system. And they also come up with a plan and execute that plan as needed for the child. All children, typically under the guidance of Child Protective Services, have external factors that are called ACEs. These are adverse childhood experiences, and each experience earns a point, and each point puts that child at risk for more health issues. So that's something to be mindful of. So if a child has went through a divorce, has a parent who's in jail or in prison, mental health issues in the home, substance abuse issues in the home, domestic violence, anything like that can really cause real life health issues. Although many have gathered more information about these ACEs, there's still a question about how specific ones cluster together and how they affect the child or youth. There's one analytic strategy, and that's called CART, or Classification and Regression Tree Analysis, which uses tree methodology to decide which ACE clusters go together to produce a specific outcome. That's something that many public health systems have been using in order to figure out what type of interventions to help improve a person or child's long-term health outcome. So impact of prevention. Prevention is important. Just like we prevent health issues, we need to prevent neglect and abuse. And many states, not many, some are investigating programs and strategies to prevent maltreatment from ever occurring. These programs are voluntary prevention programs that were designed to serve families who either had their cases screened out of the system or had their cases closed due to no safety concerns at that time. So these programs, a CPS worker will make a referral to the program, which is completely voluntary. Prevention services help the family with issues such as substance abuse, mental health, domestic violence, poverty, parenting concerns, financial concerns, educational concerns. With these in place, studies have shown a significant decrease in maltreatment in those high-risk families that were identified by CPS in the past. So CPS, they follow policies, procedures, but they're also limited on what they can do. When it comes to making decisions, that could mean life or death of a child. No decision is easy. Many people believe CPS err on the side of caution, but it is a concept called decision-making ecology framework model. I have an example. The model weighs on factors that are directly related to the family's case, the CPS agency, the worker, and any external forces. So this model provides a baseline for the understanding of how CPS works with their decisions. So, for example, here's my example. So the orange blobs are the influencers. So case factors, organizational factors, external factors, and decision-making factors. Those all go into how the worker makes the decision, the decision-making process. That will determine what outcomes are to be expected. That's that. And then going back to voluntary services. Some counties and states have begun to expand to provide child maltreatment prevention services to families that were not traditionally in need of CPS services. Many of these families did not meet the statutory requirements of formal CPS investigation. They screened out cases, and there was no legal issues to investigate. They were then referred to community response programs instead for preventative services. So states such as Wisconsin, California, Minnesota, those are some that have these programs. And they want to prevent re-referrals with CPS or any other danger or safety issues in the home. Approximately 5% of all families who are investigated for maltreatment and 15% of all sustained cases are reopened, usually within 6 months. So that's something that they want to prevent. Some of the services offered through the home-based CRP program, CPR program, include emergency cash assistance, case management, referrals to community services, housing assistance, medical assistance, advocacy, and my next visual. So services received by families through voluntary programs. Here's a list, I'll read it off. So as far as basic needs, 89% needed help with basic needs. Transportation needs, 83%. Flexible funds, financial assistance, 82%. Assistance with employment to provide financial stability, 80%. Assistance finding housing, 69%. Parenting and family well-being, 67%. Mental and substance abuse help, 58%. Assistance with legal issues and issues with being a victim, probably of domestic violence, 39%. Health issues, they needed help 20% of the time, and educational 31% of the time. So with things like that in place and really putting those supports in place, it will help to prevent maltreatment, hopefully. It's a more stable household, you're helping poverty, you're helping the whole household as a whole, so that hopefully that protects the child. Also in place quickly are citizen review panels. These are people who overlook the CPS system, make recommendations, they follow guidelines from states and federal governments. As I mentioned, social workers burn out. They are underpaid. They deal with secondary trauma, tend to quit their jobs. But who does this hurt? It hurts the community. It hurts the children. It hurts the families that they're supposed to service. So the consequences are high. So how do we prevent that? How do we help the servicers so that they can help the people? So some of the recommendations would be getting these home-based services in place, reevaluating workload of CPS social workers and outside agencies that are going to assist with investigating. Look at changes that could be made within the agency itself, set performance standards, auditing, provide training and feedback, make sure everybody has that educational and skill background that's required, making sure technology and databases are always up to date, make sure that everybody's kind of doing an evidence-based learning program. Also, like I said, looking at home-based support. And I think when you combine these agencies and everybody takes on a caseload or a workload that's fair, I think that being transparent and working together would really benefit the community, and save many lives of children. And lastly, another visual. I showed you this last week, 2 weeks ago. Basically, it's a timeline of how you can make changes. So real quickly, first contact would be with CPS and DHFS. Get a list of current policies and procedures. Next, get a number of statistics of children deaths in the local area who were already being serviced. Get police reports, ME reports, causes of death. Follow back up with CPS. Look at documentation of those deaths. Look at placement, services. Were those services being received? Were there issues with them? Figure out what happened, what went wrong, how can we prevent this in the future? Next step would be to meet with CPS again and DHFS. Describe current recommendations and changes, how they will occur. Discuss additional positions and career opportunities. If need be, work to implement community-based programming, reassess workloads, decide who's going forward to do what as far as day-to-day operations. I think working with local law enforcement is also important. You can decide how to implement new strategies, how and when they will investigate specific cases. And I suggest that a follow-up every 6 months with all agencies involved is important. Make a list of what's working, what's not working, get suggestions. Constantly be in the loop for change. People change, communities change, and sometimes the services need to change. And that's my paper. That's my project in a nutshell. Thank you.